This painting by Claude Monet was the reason that an influential art movement was coined Impressionism in the year 1874. It depicts a hazy view of the port of his native Le Havre in western France, and many people were not impressed at the time. This gradually changed as more and more artists went against the conventions of academic art. A new generation of young painters suddenly started setting up their easels outside, painting what they could perceive. As you'll discover in this list of some of the most famous Impressionist paintings, the result was a true masterclass of light and motion. Number 1. Bal du Moulin de la Galette by Pierre-Auguste Renoir. Speaking of light, Renoir's world-famous painting, which is also known as Dance at the Moulin de la Galette, embodies the Impressionist movement. This crowded scene depicts the original Moulin de la Galette, an establishment on top of Montmartre Hill in Paris. Renoir painted the scene on the spot, and he sometimes had to hold on tightly to his canvas or it would have flown away. Many of the painter's friends can be seen as this painting simply breathes movement and excitement. Renoir used small white patches to illuminate this magnificent painting. The longer you stare at it, the more you have the feeling as if this bustling scene comes to life. Number 2. Music in the Tuileries by Édouard Manet. When it comes to influential painters in art history, very few people reach the level of Édouard Manet. He was one of the first artists to depict life as it really was in France in the 1860s, and this beautiful painting is a perfect example of this. It depicts a scene that takes place in the Tuileries Garden, a large park in central Paris. Parisians came here to enjoy musical performances, even though we can't see this in Manet's painting. The people in the foreground are quite recognizable, while those in the background turn into nothing more than small patches of paint. It's pretty sure that Renoir became inspired to paint his masterpiece after seeing music in the Tuileries. Number 3. Garden at Sainte-Adresse by Claude Monet. I already mentioned Claude Monet, one of the founding fathers of Impressionism and one of its most prolific painters as well. This painting, which was completed while Monet was still in his 20s, depicts the view from a garden in the resort town of Sainte-Adresse. This town is located near Monet's home city of Le Havre on the English Channel. It depicts his father in the foreground, as well as his cousin's wife and her father near the water. It's one of the painter's most significant works of his early period, while he was still trying to find his artistic path. Number 4. Jalais, Pontoise by Camille Pissarro. Born on the island of St. Thomas, which was part of Denmark back then, Pissarro was another leading artist of the Impressionist movement. Jalais, Pontoise is the title of one of Camille Pissarro's most mesmerizing paintings of the first phase of his career. It depicts the lovely view of the town of Pontoise, which is located just northwest of Paris. The moment you look at this painting, it's as if you start seeing Camille setting up his easel and starting to paint right there on the spot. The mastery of perspective is evident, and it highlights Pissarro's love for the countryside. This painting was exhibited at the Paris Salon of 1868 and praised by critics, something that didn't really happen for Impressionists during the 1870s. Number 5. The Ballet Class by Edgar Degas. Edgar Degas was a member of the Impressionists, but he detested being referred to as such throughout his career. As seen in his world-famous Ballet Class, he didn't enjoy painting outdoors and much rather preferred to be called a realist. This scene depicts a ballet class given at the Paris Opera by a man who was presumably his friend, Jules Perrault. Degas visited these rehearsals and took notes related to how the skirts looked and how the ribbons were tied. He painted several versions of the same subject, and in each work, Degas managed to capture the female dancer's moves to perfection. Number 6. View of the Canal Saint-Martin by Alfred Sisley. This painting was completed by the British Impressionist painter who was born and lived most of his life in France. He was one of the early members and one of the few who only painted outdoors throughout his career. This work shows the view of the Canal Saint-Martin, a small canal in central Paris that connects the Seine to the much longer Canal de l'Ourcq. It's one of the countless paintings of rivers and canals by the painter and is defined by the reflections of the buildings on the water. Unlike the paintings of his colleagues, I'm not exactly a great fan of his early works, which I find a bit too dull, but tastes obviously differ. Number 7. The Family Reunion by Frédéric Bazille. Bazille was a member of the group of early Impressionists, but because he died in 1870, he never experienced the Impressionist exhibitions. This painting is the largest he ever completed and one of the most polished works as well. It depicts a family reunion in his own residence near Montpellier, a city in southern France. The scene takes place under a chestnut tree, and this highlights his distinctive use of light and shadow. Bazille was a great inspiration to his colleagues, especially when it came to painting outdoors. Number 8. Summer's Day by Berthe Morisot. Morisot was one of the 4 great female Impressionist painters and a pivotal figure of the Impressionist movement. She was married to Eugène Manet, the brother of Édouard, with whom she had a child named Julie. It was in the summer following giving birth to Julie that she painted these 2 women in the Bois de Boulogne. One of these was her nanny, accompanied by a friend, and this work features the visible brushstrokes that define her work. Completed in 1879, this painting emphasizes the experimental nature of the Impressionists at the time. Number 9. Little Girl in a Blue Armchair by Mary Cassatt. Speaking of great female Impressionist painters, Mary Cassatt could definitely hold a candle to her colleague Morisot. Born in Pennsylvania, she lived most of her adult life in France, and that's where she completed most of her paintings. She painted this incredible work of art in 1878, the year following her fallout with the French art establishment. The colorful brushstrokes on the couch on which the girl is resting almost appear to be an act of rebellion in that sense. Cassatt is well known for her paintings of children, and this is definitely one of the prettiest ones. Number 10. Luncheon of the Boating Party by Pierre-Auguste Renoir. As you already saw in his Bal du Moulin de la Galette, Pierre-Auguste Renoir often painted his friends while they were having a good time. I personally find his Luncheon of the Boating Party one of his best works, and there are several reasons for this. To keep a long story short, this painting embodies everything that defines a beautiful Impressionist painting. You can feel the excitement of the people enjoying a day out, and Renoir almost illuminates his friends with swirling colorful brushstrokes. The 2 most notable people depicted are Gustave Caillebotte on the right, whom you will get to know in just a minute, and his future wife Aline Charigot, who is playing with a little dog. Number 11. Woman with a Parasol by Claude Monet. Woman with a Parasol is also known as Madame Monet and Her Son, and both titles refer to what you can see. Monet painted his first wife Camille in many of his works, and this painting was completed when the couple lived in Argenteuil in the 1870s. Back then, this town was located in a rural area, but today it has been swallowed by the enormous metropolitan area of Paris. It was a windy summer's day in 1875, and this allowed Monet to fully use the spontaneous brushstrokes he loved so much. The grass of the meadow, the swirling white dress worn by his wife, and her veil that blows in the wind all breathe motion. Number 12. Paris Street, Rainy Day by Gustave Caillebotte. This work was completed in 1877 by Gustave Caillebotte, a man who played a crucial role in the development of Impressionism. Not only did he paint masterpieces such as this one, but his wealthy background also allowed him to buy paintings, which funded the careers of many of his friends. This gloomy scene on a rainy day in Paris highlights Caillebotte's love for photography. He also preferred to structure his paintings in the traditional academic style. This consisted of drawing lines rather than splashing thick brushstrokes onto the canvas. When you look at this painting, you get the feeling that Caillebotte wanted to paint a picture in the literal sense. Number 13. On the Terrace at Sèvres by Marie Bracquemont. The third of the female Impressionists was Marie Bracquemont, whose long career also consisted of ceramic design together with her husband. Despite being less prolific than some of her colleagues in terms of oil paintings, this painting shows just how talented she was. On the Terrace at Sèvres depicts 2 women and a man whose identity remains a mystery until today. Marie painted 2 versions of this work, which shows a scene on the terrace of her home in the southwestern part of Paris. The thick brushstrokes in the background and the use of light and color make this one of the most stunning Impressionist paintings you'll ever see. Number 14. Une loge au Théâtre Italiens by Eva Gonzalès. The fourth female impressionist to make up the four great women of the movement was Eva Gonzalez, who was born and raised in Paris. This painting shows that she was a pupil of Édouard Manet, the man who formed the bridge between realism and impressionism. She turned out to be the only formal student he ever had, and it's no surprise that her style was very similar to that of her teacher. This painting depicts a couple in a theater box of the Italian theater in Paris, a popular subject for many painters at the time. It was her greatest success and even exhibited at the Paris Salon in 1879, about 5 years after it was completed. Number 15, Shearing the Rams by Tom Roberts. Impressionism spread all around the world during the final decades of the 19th century, and it even went all the way down under. Shearing the Rams is the title of one of the ultimate masterpieces by Australian painter Tom Roberts. It depicts a large number of workers removing the wool from sheep in a typically Australian shearing shed. Although Roberts was trained in Europe between 1881 and 1885, he developed a distinctive style that defined the Heidelberg School. Not only is this work an ode to hard labor, but it has also become a cultural icon in Australia and one of the best-known paintings in the country. Number 16, The Orchestra at the Opera by Edgar Degas. I added another painting by Edgar Degas, although he probably turns in his grave for being featured in this list. The view we see here is that of the orchestra pit of the Salle La Pelletier, a building that served as the Paris Opera until it burned down in 1873. The viewer literally sits on the front row of the entertainment venue as we stare directly at the musicians. Above their heads, we partially see the dancers on stage, whose colorful dresses contrast the dark clothes of the musicians. The bassoonist in the foreground was Désiré Diot, a friend of Degas who commissioned the painting. Number 17, Rainy Day, Boston by Childe Hassam. This painting is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful works of art completed by Childe Hassam, one of the leading American Impressionist painters. This white painting depicts the intersection of Columbus Avenue and Appleton Road in the South End district of Boston. Perhaps you already noticed, but it looks strikingly similar to Caillebotte's painting of A Rainy Day in Paris, which you just saw earlier. Hassam was highly interested in the movement of people, and the longer you stare at this painting, the more you can start seeing it. I find it an incredible work of art, and at the time it was completed in 1885, it was a revolutionary painting of modern city life. Number 18, Grain Stacks by Claude Monet. Grain Stacks is the title of one of the 25 oil paintings that make up a series of paintings by Claude Monet titled Haystacks. I find this particular work one of the most beautiful in the series, as it features an up-close view of one of the haystacks with the rising sun behind it. It was completed in 1889, at the height of the French painter's career, and clearly shows that he mastered painting natural light. I'm not the only one who loves this painting, as it was sold at Sotheby's for a whopping $110 million in 2019. It was a record-breaking sale for both Monet and the Impressionists in general. Luckily, the work can be admired at the Museum Barberini in Potsdam, as the buyer put it on permanent loan at the museum in the Berlin metropolitan area. Number 19, Hip Hip Hooray by Peder Severin Krøyer. This magnificent painting was completed in 1888 by Danish painter Peder Severin Krøyer, a prominent figure of the Skagen painters. It depicts a celebration of this group of Scandinavian artists as they can be seen toasting to the good life on a beautiful summer's day. Clearly inspired by Renoir's Luncheon of the Boating Party, it's a celebration of natural light. Just look how Krøyer used small patches of white paint to illuminate the leaves of the trees and the faces of his friends. Like Tom Roberts' painting in Australia, this work is a cultural icon in Denmark, and it's pretty easy to understand why. Number 20, Boating on the Yare by Gustave Caillebotte. The French painter Gustave Caillebotte didn't merely complete paintings that resemble photographs. He experimented with different types of styles throughout his career, including painting what he could perceive outdoors. That's exactly what he did when he completed this painting, which depicts a scene near his house on the Yare River. It's a remarkable painting in the sense that we see the view from the perspective of somebody who sits in a boat nearby. The trees and bushes are reflected in the river, and the sun brightly shines on the people in the small boats, an absolutely stunning sight to behold. Number 21, The Cradle by Berthe Morisot. The Cradle is the title of another fascinating work of art by Berthe Morisot, an intriguing artist for several reasons. It depicts Berthe's older sister Edma Morisot, who is watching over her baby daughter Blanche. Edma was a painter as well, who painted the earliest known portrait of Berthe in the year 1863. As you can feel in this work, both sisters were close during the 1860s and 1870s. It's dominated by the pinkish-white color of the cradle and the curtain in the background. Another interesting fact about this painting is that it remained in the Morisot family collection and eventually passed on to Blanche, the depicted baby. Number 22, A Bar at the Folies-Bergère by Édouard Manet. This was the final major painting of Manet before he passed away at the age of 51 in 1883. It depicts a scene at the Folies-Bergère, a popular nightclub in Paris, and it appears as if the waitress is having a conversation with the man in the mirror. This is, however, an optical trick that has only been fully discovered in the early 21st century when a reconstruction of the scene was made. What I find more interesting about this scene is the realism in the foreground and the obscured view of the figures in the background. The barmaid, known as Suzanne, posed in Manet's studio for this painting, and the oranges likely identify her as a prostitute. Number 23, The Boulevard Montmartre at Night by Camille Pissarro. This enthralling painting was completed in 1897, during the final years of the artist's life. Pissarro loved to paint outdoors, but because he had developed an eye disease, he was forced to paint inside as he couldn't stand the wind. He rented hotel rooms in various cities and simply started painting what you could see out of the room's windows. He must have had a pretty amazing time in his old days because he simply loved to paint movement and life. What better place to do this than in the bustling neighborhood of Montmartre in Paris, the city's artistic center? Notice how this night scene makes the light of the streetlights almost blend in with the street and sidewalks. Number 24, The Tea by Mary Cassatt. Here's another stunning painting by American Impressionist painter Mary Cassatt. What's fascinating is that academic art critics heavily criticize just about every painting by Cassatt because of her bold use of light. That's exactly why I think that her paintings are so beautiful. By the 1890s, the number of critics who grudgingly agreed that this was sheer genius at work gradually increased as well. At the turn of the century, her influence in the world of art was so high that she was awarded the Légion d'honneur, the highest order of merit in France. Number 25, Water Lilies by Claude Monet. I started this video by explaining how the term Impressionism was coined, so it makes sense to end this list with another masterpiece by Claude Monet. Water Lilies is the title of the most extensive series by the French artist, as it features about 250 oil paintings. He completed these paintings during the final decades of his life, depicting the flowers that grew in the pond of his house in Giverny. Many paintings are held in private collections, but you can admire versions in dozens of museums too. From Los Angeles to Paris and from London to Tokyo, you'll find Monet's water lilies in major museums all around the world.